Hi everyone. Happy Friday. I don't know what day it is anymore, but I do know today is Friday because it's book club day. And this week we read Bonjour Tristesse, which is one of my favorite books. I read it when I was 17. It's about a 17-year-old girl, kind of about youth and change, the changes we go through being young women. And actually the writer, Françoise Sagan, she was 18 when she wrote it and published it, which is so cool. And it actually was a huge book in France at the time. It took her only like 7 weeks to write it, and it was a big hit, but it was also super controversial. Like, it would have been banned in the US at the time that she published it. So, but yeah, I just really connected to the book when I read it, to the main character, Cecile, and I hope you guys did too. And this week is an extra special week because I got to merge my book club with Marc Jacobs, and they're launching an open book series with their bookstore in NYC called Bookmark, which I go to all the time. It's one of the best bookstores in New York. They have everything, including super cool books like this, Bonjour Tristesse, that maybe not everyone has read. And we're having on their friend and writer, Stephanie. Stephanie is gonna talk to us about Bonjour Tristesse. I know she's a fellow fan of the book, and also just about being a woman in writing and a creative force. So yeah, it's a good week, guys, for us. I hope you guys read the book. I got to read it again. I loved reading it again. It also weirdly, as I was reading it, connected to kind of what's going on in the world. You know, a lot of the book, almost the whole book, takes place kind of like in this house, where the woman in the book, Cecile, who's 17, she's not leaving. She's just kind of there, spending her days with herself, reading, studying, doing things that I think a lot of us find ourselves doing, finding like little pleasures in kind of the quiet moments that we're all having right now. So yeah. But before we talk to Stephanie, I wanted to read some of my favorite quotes, just cool themes I found in the book, stuff like that. And hopefully I can try to take some of your guys' questions, because I know it's hard doing lives to like find the questions. I'm new at this, but I feel like I'm getting better. So let's start reading quotes. And if you guys have questions, please ask them. So this is the first quote that I really liked. I pulled it from the book, and it's on attraction. And Cecile says, "I do not know if the desire to attract others comes from a superabundance of vitality, possessiveness, or the hidden, unspoken need to be reassured." And there is something very true about that almost need for reassurance, especially being a young woman, kind of seeking that kind of reassurance in outside forces as you learn to love yourself. And I think that comes with age, kind of like that reassurance you get from yourself. There's another quote on pleasure that I really liked. It says, "For this was the round of love, fear which leads on desire, tenderness, and fury, and that brutal anguish which triumphantly follows pleasure." And it's also true, like, I think when you're young and growing up, kind of pleasure is so fleeting, and it feels like what follows it, the almost come down of it, can feel very angering, or it's very intense, and we start to feel things very intensely at that age of 17, and I think that Francois did a really beautiful way of capturing that. I also think there's something super special about women capturing women, and that's a theme we'll talk about later, but yeah. And then there was another one on naivety, which is a really interesting concept for me, because I don't think naivety has a lot to do with age. I think it has a lot to do with, you know, each person individually. But there's a really great quote in the book, and it says, "I am obliged to resort to some expedient like lighting a cigarette, putting on a record, or telephoning to a friend. Then gradually I begin to think of something else, but I do not like having to take refuge in forgetfulness and frivolity. Instead, I face my memories and fighting them." I think that's also really a great quote, because we all tend to distract ourselves from our feelings, and right now I think we're all probably experiencing that we have less distractions, less ways to distract ourselves from these feelings, and kind of figuring out ways to face them and process them is super interesting, and that's what Cecile in the book was learning to do at the time. So I kind of find that that was a common theme without the book. If you guys have questions, though, I would love to answer them, or else I'll just bring Stephanie right on and we can talk to her. Or if you guys had great quotes that you found, because I just pull quotes when I read all the time, and this book has so many. Like, there's an interview, if you guys haven't read it, that if you read the book and you really liked it, that Françoise did in, I think, the Paris Review, and like her answers in this interview should be a novel themselves. She's so well spoken, so smart, so wonderful. I can post the link on my story if you guys want to read it, but I really enjoyed reading that. After reading this book, you kind of get a better understanding of her. Do you guys have any questions? Please shoot, fire away. There's also a really great movie that they made after the book came out, and I highly recommend the movie. It is in French, but it's subtitles. Everyone's asking what the name of the book is. The name of the book is Bonjour Tristesse, and it means hello sadness, which I feel like a lot of us have felt that. Yeah. Someone said, what do you look for when choosing a book to read? Honestly, I feel very fortunate to have a lot of friends who like to read. So, and my mom loves to read, so I feel like when I have like people to go to get book recommendations, and it's super amazing. And also I know, like, if I want a philosophy book, who I'll go to. If I want a really great self-help book, who I go to. If I want a really great romance novel. Someone said, who is your favorite character? Ooh. I have to say Cecile, I think just because I related the most to her. There is something really lovely about Anne, who plays one of the main women characters in the book. And she has this really incredible intelligence about her, and this really, like, unapologetic way that she speaks. And I really admired her character a lot. Someone said, what book you're reading right now? Well, we have a book coming up this week that I'll tell you guys about, and it's really good. I started it today, and I think you guys are really gonna like it, and it's super of the times. I think you'll see that when you read it. What was your opinion on the father's character? You know, the relationship between Cecile and her father in the book, I think, is something super special. Their ability to be alone with each other, and kind of, I feel like this common understanding that they have for each other is really beautiful, and it really shows. I definitely think he is a flawed person, but what I admire the most about his character is that he admits to being flawed. He doesn't try to put on a front and try to be somebody that he isn't, and he's super honest with Cecile, and I think that played a super big role in her growing up and being mature, because he didn't hide or shield her from those things, and I think that formed a really incredible bond between them. I saw more questions. Ooh. Oh my god, Bill, thank you. I got Charlotte to read, and this is really thrilling. And Charlotte's father, Bill, is on here, and he said thank you. Did the character stay in your mind after you finished the book? Absolutely, and I think that's a testament to a really incredible book, is when the characters stick with you, and you can kind of continue developing them after you read it in your mind, and that's what this book did for me. And there were some, like, brutal honesties that we all kind of feel. And I think in a way this book feels like a diary, where it's stuff that maybe feelings she has that she doesn't want to tell everyone that she's feeling, maybe selfish or, you know, kind of outrageous feelings that you have when you're a young woman or young man that you don't always vocalize, and she just tells them with such truth that it kind of forces us all to stare at ourselves, because I think we've all kind of felt certain ways that she portrays in the book. Any poems or books you really love? Well, actually, the name of this book, Bonjour Tristesse, comes from a poem. I think Stephanie's gonna share some of the lines from that poem with you guys, because it's such an incredible poem, and Françoise really liked that poem. I think that's why she pulled the name of the book from here. All right, well, should we bring on Stephanie? Like, I'm really excited. I've never met her before. I think this is gonna be really cool. She has her debut novel coming out in September. So maybe we can do that for book club when it comes out, which would be really cool. And she's already written a memoir. She's very, very intelligent, very smart. And I will try to keep up with her. So let's bring Stephanie on here. If we can find her on here. This is the kink that I'm still working out, guys, okay? Like, I feel pretty tech savvy, but then when it comes to this, I'm pretty useless, so just bear with me. I apologize. Let's find. Okay. I think we're doing it. We're doing it, sort of. Okay, I'm having technical difficulties. I'm definitely adding Mark's Instagram. I feel like a dad, you know when dads like take photos and there's always like half their finger in every picture? That's how I feel right now, like a dad. And I shouldn't, because I'm technically a part of the generation that should know how to do this. Okay. We're getting there. I'm doing this definitely the hardest way I possibly could, so. A lot of you requested to join here. There we go. I'm so proud of myself for this, guy. This is massive.
Hi.
Hi.
We did
Sorry
it.
for my inability to use technology.
No, what's up?
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Are you in New York?
Yeah, I am.
How are you holding up?
I'm good. I put on a little lipstick for you. I'm ready.
I know. I'm very impressed. I literally was like, should I wear red lipstick? And then I was like, look, I haven't had jeans on in a week. I think putting on clothes in general is a big step, but I'm very impressed with the red lips.
I mean, I couldn't get past this sweatsuit, but I got the red lipstick, so.
That's more than enough, I think. I'm like wearing, most of the time when I'm like filming these, I'm in like boxers, but I just do like the top half of my
Totally
look presentable. But thanks for coming on.
No,
That's
thank
so
you for
awesome.
having me.
So you've read the book.
Yes.
How old were you when you read the book?
When I first read the book, I was 19.
Yeah.
And which I guess is like pretty much the perfect age. How about you? You were?
I was 17, so
like,
yeah,
okay, so exact similar thing. And I read it. I actually grew up in France, so I was reading it at the time, sort of with that in mind. And yeah, tell me what your initial thoughts were when you read it.
I mean, I really felt connected to Cecile just because I think there's something so honest about the way Francois writes her. And I like sat down and read it in a day. I was and you can just tell kind of the manner in which Francois wrote it was like it's meant to be read as like a whole. And I loved it. But I wanted to ask, like, do you think that the age in which you read it, do you think that played a role in how you perceive the book?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think the thing that I love the most about it is that, and you kind of touched upon this, is that she writes as if, you know, she's totally non-judgmental, but she's super aware of herself and super self-aware, and she tells it exactly how she sees it, but also maintains this distance, which is really interesting, and sort of has this ability to like tell everything like it is without casting any judgment, which feels kind of, you know, good when you're sort of trying to figure things out yourself.
Absolutely. Like having preconceived ideas, I think when you're still figuring out the world and your role in the world, I think can be dangerous. So it's kind of good. I think the way she just like tells everything as it is, and then you kind of see her figure things out. It's almost like her stream of conscious is like being written throughout the book. And that's a really cool process to see written, I think.
Totally. And I think that's interesting that it's like a book about her psychology in a way, and that she, you know, the whole book is like she's super childlike kind of at the beginning. She's really impulsive. She doesn't really, she's reckless. She thinks she's playing a game with people's lives. And then that's the thing that kind of, you know, that's the thing that hit, I mean, spoiler alert, that's the thing that hits her at the end. which is like really, you know, you kind of do feel like that, I think, a little bit when you're that age. You're like super, you know, like you feel like nothing's gonna happen. You're, you know, and then
yeah, like there's no responsibility for your actions until that point, and then all of a sudden you start realizing that your actions have consequences, that these are people's lives. And I think also like you start seeing her feeling guilt and remorse, which actually I don't feel like come in to play until, you know, you are 17, 18, those real feelings of remorse.
Totally.
And you like see them start creeping in on her. And yeah, that's what I loved about this book. But you've written a memoir.
Yeah, I mean, yes.
I mean,
I'm not sure if it can
I'm
be
looking
called
at
that.
you and I'm like, you're way too young to have a memoir.
No, I'm not sure it can be. But you know what? It's funny because it actually mentions Bonjour Tristesse in the book, and it talks a little bit about the idea, because the character herself is, you know, it's me, but it's also like this younger voice of me, and you know, it's, you know, there are parts where you're like, I'm reading it now and I'm like, oh my god, like this girl's insufferable. You know, you're writing in this voice, and you know, and there's this real idea that you're sort of just like laying it all out there. And yeah, you do sound kind of terrible, you know, and I mean, that was the whole thing with Françoise Sagan. She kind of did it with the wink, you know, she's like, I know, you know, the irony of what this sounds like. Like, and she's telling it, I mean, the only thing she never seems super aware of is her privilege in the situation, which is also, I think she does on purpose, because she knows that that can also, you know, carries its own kind of judgment. So it's kind of really, you know, and you get that from the Paris Review interview. Yeah, as well.
100%. And she kind of is saying, she's like, I realized that at the time, like, I pulled this quote basically about how she owed most of her pleasure to money. And, like, that was, it seemed like her love of pleasure and of the things that money could get her was, like, a big part of who she was and who her character was. And she recognizes it, but I do agree she doesn't want it to play a big role, because it kind of then can like overpower her actual feelings as like a 17-year-old woman.
Totally. And then when she realizes like it's funny too, because Anne sort of represents this like balanced life. And then she's like rebelling against this balanced life, or someone taking away the recklessness and the ability to sort of be that character. And then she realizes though that like it could have been a good thing. It's like that sort of battle between stability and sort of carefree, you know, living, I think is as a theme you often have in books about women, by women, you know. And this book was written in the 50s, so I think that it was really radical at the time, because it was also this young girl who sort of, we didn't mention, but did you mention Cyril, her love interest, the young
no, we haven't talked about him yet.
Okay,
let's get into
it. So a little intro. Cyril is this sort of handsome young sailor law student who she like takes an interest to, but she knows, she's like straight up front, she's like, this isn't the guy I'm gonna end up with. And for the time that was super radical.
So yeah, that's what they were saying, like this book would not have been published in the US at the time, because it was super radical.
And she sort of embraces that and is aware of that. And you know, whereas maybe they wouldn't accept that like a young woman was, you know, having like a fun summer and just for her own pleasure and for her own enjoyment. So that was kind of, you know, part of the radicality of that. And you know, her parents didn't let her publish it under her name.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, her so the name Sagan comes from a Proust character named Princess de Sagan. And so it was like her pen name, because her parents were like mortified by,
like,
you know,
is this what your brain is doing right now? And we're not.
Yeah, and also it was like, you know, they knew it was probably a commentary. I mean, maybe not, but on them a little bit. And yeah, and then she wrote it in like 7 weeks or something.
Yeah, and I think she did like 3 hours a day, and she just did it because she was like, I know it'd be hard for especially women my age to sit down and focus on something, and I just want to prove to myself that I can do it.
I read like the same thing, and then the thing about her being like, I could take a crazy trip, but instead I'm going to lock myself in a room and write a book.
Which I loved. I love that her 18-year-old brain was saying that, because I super feel that, and like I love that that's where she was in her life.
And I think her parents helped her get it published, but then with the caveat that she needed to change the name. And then it was like a runaway bestseller, which then led her to become this sort of like larger than life character. I don't know like how much you want to talk about that, but I kind of love that about her. Like the press called her like a charming little monster.
Yeah, she was this like spitfire, like
her car. She was racing cars and like going.
Yeah, she was like a wild little genius woman who was so powerful. And at the time when like women did not, it wasn't what it is now. Even the way she writes about, like she was 17, she was already thinking about who she was going to marry, and that's so far off from where we are now. And just like I think the way that she saw herself, like the amount of credibility she gave herself at such a young age was way, way ahead of her time. And that's, I think she got this like incredible, crazy kind of reputation where she was just like this wild woman in literature, which that's why I love her so much. Like she just has the coolest reputation ever, and she's so smart.
And then like there's like, you hear about these little stories of like Juliet Greco and her at these cafes, and then she had you know, she was around all these different people, and, you know, it just was this kind of crazy whirlwind. And I think that the way she dealt with that a little too was like acting out like that and sort of just like becoming a part, you know, and then she became this larger than life. And actually it's funny because in the book, doesn't he call her a savage little cat? Like the dad calls her. I love these little names, but it's also kind of sad because women writers always get these kind of little, you know, these kind of like little names, like, you know, like Clarice Lispector was like, they said she was like morbidly insensitive and well-dressed. Like there's always some kind of,
and also
you
like,
know, dig.
Since when I feel like that's also something to be said is like, you know, you wouldn't hear them really commenting on a male author's appearance when describing him. It wouldn't say and well-dressed, but because they're talking about a woman, all of a sudden like her appearances have to matter in how you describe her as an author, which I think, you know, especially in that time, like that was a serious issue that women in any creative field were dealing with.
And imagine she's this young too, so it's like your chances of getting taken seriously have gone from like here to here, and then she just did it. And I think that's like one thing that I really love, is also just this idea too that, and then she made the movie. She was like on set making the movie, like the photos, and it's, you know, she had that short hair, and then Jean Seberg has the short hair, and
it's so good. Have you seen the movie?
Yeah. I was like thinking I might just like surprise you and do that because my hair has gotten so long. I was like, I might as well just like give it a Bonjour Tristesse
just do it online.
Haircut.
Just like
and then just like show up with the boy cut. But yeah, no, it's so charming. And I mean, the movie too, I think helped make the myth, I mean, like of the whole thing as well, probably. Which so is also, you know, it also makes me think of, you're reading the Marguerite Duras book. And I always see these pictures of her on set for her movies, sort of I feel like they both had that kind of sort of, you know, like they were like overlooking their projects in this way that I really admire.
Yeah, well, they just didn't want, like, I feel like, and I think Francois actually says this in the interview, and she's like, you know, when you release a book, and I don't know if you've experienced this, but when you like put your writing out there, all of a sudden it can feel like it doesn't belong to you anymore. Like you're just relinquishing all this power to the world. All of a sudden it's out of your hands. And then I think for them to go back and have such creative control and oversee the movies was probably a way for them to like regain control of these stories that they were telling.
Totally. And I think as a woman writer, you're like constantly trying to write your own narrative, and it gets out of control no matter what. If you're in the public eye, that happens. You know, if people create stories around stories, it's just like a natural evolution to this like impulse to like write down your narrative and hold your narrative. And the fact that she was so young and did that and didn't it's kind of fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, being young and being a woman at that time, like she was not given any power, and I think like the way that she took it was so authentic and so incredible. Like she's truly one of my favorite people. But I think, yeah, just like this larger theme of women in literature, in any field of creativity, when your story is kind of, it's like you release it and then all of a sudden people tell the rest for you. And I'm sure as a writer, it can be very difficult to give something to the world and then let them kind of do what they want with it. And
I mean, I think
how do you
that's
handle that?
I think that's the hardest thing. I mean, at a certain point, I mean, that's what's also actually interesting about Francois is that she's kind of, you can tell she's kind of made up her mind to be aloof about the whole thing. Like, she's like, I'm removing myself. You'll have your narrative. I'll have, you know, there'll be a proprietary narrative. And then this is what, and you kind of have to do that. And like, sort of, I mean, I think it's like also that thing that like you never want to explain too much. Like, you know, like there's always something about that, which is also why it's kind of fun that they worked on the movies, because that was another way of showing the book, but not having to actually explain or answer questions about it, or like.
Yeah. Well, you also want to let people develop the characters in their head as well. Like, I know I took, like, the way that I perceived a lot of the characters is probably very different than the way a lot of other people, and just like, you know, if my brother were to read this book, I'm sure he'd have a very different take on it and a very different experience reading
totally.
it.
And that's like the problem sometimes with having the film like sort of, you know, jump in front or whatever. You get like these ideas, but yeah, no, I definitely think that's a really, you know, that's a way to sort of also maintain control of the images that are associated with the work. Yeah. Like literally, like we use the still from the set, like to like sort of talk about the book. So it's kind of funny.
It's so wild.
And I wanted to ask you though, like what I was thinking when I was reading this was I was like, it occurred to me, I've heard you like the book, The Bad Girl.
Love
that book. And that was set in the 50s and was a girl who's 15 too. And it was like all about the son sort of, you know, making people hysterical. And I don't know, it just like made me think of that. And I was like, I wonder if she, like, it was kind of like a similar idea. And I'm putting the two together and how radical that was to have this female character who's like sort of mesmerizing and, you know, in the sun and making these decisions or leading people astray. And
and I grew up in Malibu, like in the sun on the beach.
Clearly I have not seen the light of day.
No, this is very new because I live in New York. I haven't been there.
Maybe I will go outside tomorrow.
No, I'm so happy to have the sun right now, and reading this book, like it made me, as I was reading it, I was like, I can't be reading this inside. I have to go into the sun right now.
The sun is a character in that story.
Truly, I think
it really is
one of the main characters in the book, and it plays such a role and like casts just this overall tone over the book. And the way that she talks about the sun, and I pulled a quote about the sun that she says, I realize that I have forgotten an important factor, the presence of the sea with its incessant rhythm. She's basically talking about her surroundings like they're, you know, right there with her, like they're her friends, because she isn't real. It's really told just with her alone for most of the book and kind of her thoughts. And so these elements like the sun and the sea are playing a really important role in like the character development throughout the book.
And it's also like, it's very sort of French of that moment to have her just be the one character and then have like one other character. You know, there weren't that many characters. There was like, you know, and it was like sort of these basic dramatic roles as well. But I love that idea about the sun, because it always was like, she's like, I was laying in the sun, I was doing nothing. It became this sort of like symbol of like, of being carefree, which is like what it is in a lot of, I feel like there's this very sort of, yeah, I mean, it's a holiday. She's on holiday. She's like,
she like wakes up and she's like, you know, makes a point to say, and I laid in bed with the sun on my back for hours. And just, like, little moments like that throughout the book, I feel like really ground you as a reader and kind of like pull you in. And those were the moments that drew me the most, because I really felt like I was like there with her, experiencing her as she just like sat there and thought. And she does a lot of this like self-reflecting, which is true. Like I still find myself doing that. I think especially being a young woman, like we can just sit there in our own heads for so long and
especially
like fantasize. Especially now, we have no other choice but to do that. And that's why I didn't even realize, you know, that wasn't why we chose the book this week. But as I was reading it, I realized it really applied to what's going on right now, because we're alone with our own thoughts for so long.
And I think that's really dangerous, as in like in like the way sense of like it really causes you to confront yourself. So like it's like a, you know, and that's like kind of what happens to her, is that it's almost like too, you mentioned before this idea when you were first talking about the distraction, and I think that's like a really important thing, and something that my first book was about like trying to have these things that you look at to like not have to be in your head. And it's like for her it was like, you know, as soon as Anne shows up and says, I have to do my studies, or because she's like this kind of discreet, she's used to all these noisy people who don't let her, she doesn't have to face herself.
Yeah, you don't have to think when there's all this noise going around. You can like, it takes you out of your own head.
And when you have somewhere to go and someplace to be, and like you can, you know, and when you have to actually sit with it, which is, you know, that was a really great point that you made, which is why the book is sort of very prescient, you know, like also, you know, it makes a lot of sense that she's like sitting there and then these things happen. And then she even goes so far as to think that Anne has given her a gift in the like ambiguity of the final scene.
The ending.
Yeah, the
Did you feel
ending.
like, so you grew up in France, did you feel like this sort of culture that she's talking about was true for you growing up in France, or was that like, I mean, I know it's a very specific circumstance, her and her father, and
No,
she's
I
going to
mean,
these
there
parties,
definitely
but
is this. No, there definitely is this culture of a certain kind, and it is of a certain privilege around, the summer of going to certain places, of certain things. And I think she really does capture some of the value system that you might think, is involved with that, and sort of presents it sort of just as it is. Like her father, like you said, you're like not really sure about her dad, but he's kind of great, but you're not really sure about him. And yeah, and he's, and that's the thing though. She like everyone is, it's like a very amoral stance the whole book. She's not saying, she's not judging anyone, she's not judging herself. She's sort of, and that also for a young girl is like, whoa, it's kind of, it throws you a curve, because you're like, novelists, before, in a certain tradition would be moralizing. They'd say like, this is good, this is bad, this is, and here she is, and she's like, I don't know.
this
like,
is what happened, but I don't know.
Like, and now I have no idea, and nothing's binary. Like there's like, there's gray, and this is, and I may have ruined someone else's life. I may have ruined my own life, but everything is real now.
Yeah, and she goes back and forth, and she's like not afraid to admit that she doesn't know and that she might have been wrong. She goes back and forth by being like, one day she wants to, create this whole elaborate plan. The next day, or even that night, she'll be sitting at dinner and she feels bad, and she again goes back, and then the next morning she wakes up and she's like, you know what? No, I still want to. So it's just like this very true process that we go through of like going back and forth on our decisions. There isn't always a clear moral answer to things, and even when there is, it's like the way that we talk ourselves in and out of it, especially being 17 years old and growing up in this environment of like being surrounded by adults and being treated like an adult when maybe you haven't had all those experiences yet.
Totally. And the idea that you can take like inaction is also a decision sort of in and of itself. Like when she decides not to halt to like her plan, or like you start to realize that everything is a decision, and it's just, and it's, no, but that's definitely that's really a really valid point about that. But I want to know also, like, what did you think about the idea of Elsa? Do we talk about Elsa a little bit?
I think we should touch a little on every character, because I think it's fun there are only like 5 really characters, but
yeah, exactly. So Elsa is this sort of she's meant to be kind of like the sort of token sort of trophy girlfriend, right?
She's like the young, beautiful, closer and, probably to Cecile's age than to
exactly. She's like, he could be your dad. But and then this is like the girl, they call her, I think she's referred to as his mistress, but Cecile's mom is dead. So he is a widow. So but this is his girlfriend who he brings with him.
It seems he kind of has an ever revolving door of these women kind of coming in and out of his life that his daughter has become pretty immune to. She seems like she's,
which would be kind of fun in like, I'm like, oh, that'd be like having new friends like come around all the time, like rotation. But no, and then like this other woman who was her mother's friend, which is like never really talked about, but I think there is another layer to that it was like, this is your late mother's friend who's showing up and interested in your father,
she had previously taken her and kind of like helped raise her, right? And then gave her back to her father. So she had already kind of like put all of her manners in place and like helped get her pretty straightened out as she was growing up. So I think she already had this kind of like role of authority in her life.
Totally. And it's really interesting because they also make a point to mention that she like worked in fashion. She was like this symbol of discretion and poise, and like she was coming from the city, and it was like all these things that maybe she felt wobbly and sort of like adolescent and like, unkempt, and
these other women didn't necessarily make her feel, not intellectual, or because they were more on her level, I think, and so
they didn't challenge her.
She's being challenged, and especially by a woman, and she hasn't had a woman figure in her life, so she kind of feels like intimidated by her.
And I think there's something very real about that too, like, and she's not, she talks about that, the jealousy between the women, and in this case it's an easier story to swallow because it's her father, but it is like an occurrence in like human dynamics. And in this case it's like you know, you feel it because you're like, yeah, she's taking her father away. She could be filling her mother's place. Like, there's so much about it. You actually understand. Like, not once was I ever like, oh my gosh, this girl is insane. You're like, I totally would have felt the same way.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, she feels like, you know, she wasn't threatened by these other women. She knew they weren't invading her and her father's privacy or weren't like threatening the dynamic that her and her father had. And I think when Anne did, that's when she started feeling very vulnerable and like wanted to take action and be like, this, I can't let this happen. And I think like that's why I think the Elsa dynamic towards the end begins to confuse me, because her father does, it kind of, he falls into the trap a little bit of Elsa trying to get him back. And I think that also speaks on her kind of realizing, oh, I actually do have power in these people's lives.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point that you make, which I think is what for me was the most sort of interesting thing about it, is that she starts to realize that she can sort of predict the way people are going to react to things. Mm-hmm. And she's like aware of the psychology of her father, which is really scary when you're a kid, right? Because you think mm-hmm. about it, you're like, you don't think you have that kind of power. Mm-mm. And then
she's proven right, and she's like,
totally.
Oh, like she realizes that she was right. And I think those moments where she goes, it's so great, like I totally got it right, and I knew exactly how to push his buttons, and
then she's like, oh my god, I caused an incredible tragedy.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden it gets really real, and she's like, oh, it's not, you know, I'm not playing dress up anymore, like these are people's lives that I'm really messing with.
Yeah.
And I wanted to know also what you thought of the boy, Cyril. The
boy
on the sailboat.
It's funny, he reminds me so much of like this classic character from these like films, you know, where they're like on the beach, and I like imagine him with curly hair. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? Like
super tan, comes like
yeah, like he's like a sort of like, I don't know, maybe like like, and he, you know, they mentioned I think that he's a law student, and he's and it's just funny to me that she immediately, I mean, it also speaks somewhat to the psychology of when you're young. Like she immediately is like, the second he takes an interest in her, you can kind of feel her being like,
yeah,
you know, like you like me too much, you know, step away. And that also is also kind of, though, it also betrays her, you know, her fear of an intimacy, because he seems like he's kind of a decent guy.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
I would root for him, you know.
I was rooting for him too, and he's
totally
willing to help her. He takes Elsa in to help her.
Yeah, and he's like a real team player. Plan anything you want. The poor guy. He's like,
I know, he's really doing. And I think also it's interesting how she finds these kind of moments of peace with him throughout, you know, everything that's going on, which I do think is especially true being young and in love, or maybe not in love, but with someone, and kind of being able to like temporarily pause time and kind of forget about all of the other craziness that's happening, and this ability that, you know, being with someone that you care about has of like suspending everything else, and she kind of can just forget about all the drama she's causing when she's laying there with him.
And it's really modern too, that she's aware that she's having this love or this moment, and it's not going to be forever. And for that time, that was super radical.
Yeah. And you know, he's 25 or 26 in the book, I think, and she's 17, which also now is a, you know, just the way that they thought, and he's in a very different place in his life. But at that time, being a 17-year-old woman, you were already thinking about getting married. And that's, you know, she's on summer vacation, and she's like already thinking about, well, he's not going to be my husband, but he could be, and I should probably start thinking about that. And you're like, well, I mean, it's just so wild, the difference in the times.
Yeah. And then also that she, yeah, it's funny how she is about him. It's funny that it's like him and Elsa are like the you know, like sort of the pair that are like the dupes of like, you know, like you can kind of pair up the characters. Like
they're kind of like the lighthearted.
Yeah, and they're the paper dolls that she plays with too, when she like creates her.
Yeah, it's wild. And just, I think also what I really took an interest to was the way that she acts in these sort of more grown-up atmospheres when she goes out with like the night when they all go out with Anne, Elsa, her dad, and she's playing this role of like, you know, she's talking amongst all the adults. And I think there is something very interesting about being a kid and not being treated as such. That definitely matures you and grows you up. And I think that's probably why she started having these feelings probably before she was ready to, because she was in an environment holding her own amongst adults.
I mean, as you have had to do a lot of your life.
Yeah.
Which is like super interesting to hear you see, like, to, you know, hear you say that, like, that's a point that stuck out to you, because that is so true. Like, you know, she's not having this she's also, that's actually a really good point. She's also always with her father. So she's not with her peers. She's forced into situations with people who are always, and so actually the girls that her father brings along are kind of like her peers.
Exactly. The closest she gets to it. And I also think that that's part of the reason also, like, she doesn't have peers. So I think if she was more amongst her peers,
that's actually because she's rebelling from school too. She doesn't want to be at school, which is why she has no peers, because she doesn't go to
exactly. And she's, you know, Anne's forcing her to study, and she's getting frustrated because she feels super intellectual in all these other ways in her life, and then it comes to what she should be focusing on, and she gets super frustrated because, you know, there are books that she's trying to read that she doesn't understand, and for her to feel like such an adult. And I kind of have experienced that too, you know. It's like you grow up very quickly, and then when you have these moments of reminding you of your age, and it can be very frustrating or kind of very confusing trying to navigate the ways in which you matured and the ways that you haven't yet.
And also then you also, I mean, there are different kinds of intelligence, and that's the thing. She has acute emotional intelligence and psychological intelligence. And so like her being like, I don't want to study. I mean, she's also realizing that there are different kinds of intelligence in the way you move through the world. And that's also, I mean, like, it can't be quantified, you know, like this idea that, you know, you can have street smarts and you can have emotional intelligence, and you can, like, you know, not be able to write your thesis about whatever.
Yeah, but it doesn't mean that you're not intellectual.
No. And in fact, like, sort of this, and she realizes too quickly that life isn't a game, whereas you could argue that the French girls who are at home working on their, like, baccalaureate or, like, you know, studying aren't actually as in life as she's sort of like gone head first.
Yeah. And then you would place those people at, you know, a dinner that she's sitting at holding her own, and they wouldn't know what to say. And I think it really plays on that idea of the different ways in which we mature and how our surroundings play a huge role in that.
Which I love hearing you say that, because, you know, like, for example, like, you can have an unconventional sort of education, and you can be like an autodidactic and read a lot of books and have just as much, you know, like, I'm really interested in, when did you start to love, you know, reading? And, like, I've loved all the books you've chosen.
Thank you.
For the
I've always loved reading, but I, like, rediscovered my love for it, I would say, because and that's why I really connected to this book. I finished school early. When I was 16, I graduated.
Right, which made me think of that too, you know, like this idea of having another kind of, you know, intelligence and, like, teaching yourself as you go.
Yeah, and I was kind of thrown again into a world with mostly adults, and I was very appreciative. And my parents, you know, I always tell people, like, my parents never had a kids table, so they always treated us like adults, and we were meant to hold our own at dinner. Whoever we were sitting next to, it was like, you should know how to spark a conversation. And that came, you know, in such handy when I went out on my own, because I realized, like, yeah, maybe I didn't finish school fully, but I now can, like, enter a room and know how to talk to people. But I think that's then when I started doing that, I was like, but I still really want to educate myself. If I can't go to college right now, I would love to expand my education. And I realized I could do that through books, and I completely fell in love. The first book I read that really, like, sparked my love of books again after school was The Stranger, which is a crazy book to start with, by the way. I don't know why I chose that one, but
Did you hear the thing about there's been such a surge in sales of The Plague, his other books.
Which, craziest thing, I was reading The Plague when this all started, and I
just by chance,
because I had never read it. So I started reading it, and then all these, like, I start hearing all these things start circulating, and I had to stop because I was like, this might be a little too close to home to read right now.
It was funny when I first, because, you know, it slowly all started to coalesce, and then I kept reading that, you know, the sales of the book were, because we look, you know, as you say, it's another kind of intelligence. We look towards these sort of, you know, a book becomes, for the most part, I think, super, you know, I mean, there are examples that, you know, aren't the case, but a book becomes long lasting and sort of, like, you know, in our consciousness because it's telling us something, or there's a reason, or, you know, we can return back to it. And so it is trippy when that happens, when you're sort of like,
you're finding these parallels.
I mean, that's why reading it right now, though. I always try and think that, like, there was a quote someone once said that, like, you know, you're always looking as a writer to get the Me Too, in the sense of it being like, oh, that happened, you know, as well. There's like an E.M. Forster quote about that.
Absolutely.
And it's just like, you're like, I never thought anyone else felt that. And then you hear someone else say they felt it. which I think is kind of what Cecile was for a lot of girls.
Absolutely.
No one was talking about it.
Yeah, and no one, especially at that time, like their voices were not welcome to saying how they felt, especially if it wasn't on trend with what a young lady was supposed to feel or do or act like. And I think it was probably such a relief for young women at the time to read this and feel understood and seen and feel like they had a voice and there was space for them in the world to say how they feel.
Are there other books that you have given you the same kind of sensation or feeling of recognition?
Yeah, I mean, the book we read 2 weeks ago, Normal People, I just felt was very real.
I love that. Yeah, it's good.
Very, very real and just true about kind of the messiness of being in love with someone and how it doesn't always have a beginning, middle, and end necessarily. I just think she writes in a very true and honest and beautiful way. I mean, gosh, I'm trying to think what else.
It's a hard question to be like thrown up, but I think that's, and
I think
like,
you find it in different books. It's like, even reading The Stranger, which is such an outrageous and crazy book, you're still finding these little moments of like, yeah, I felt that way too, or I get where they're coming from, and like that's, to me, my favorite part of reading is empathizing with all the different characters.
Yeah, or like also being able to say like, what would I do? And also there's kind of also, I love these, what wouldn't I do?
Mm-hmm.
And let's see what, and that's also the whole thing of, you know, making a choice, like which direction.
Mm-hmm. Each book is like, it's like its own moral compass that you're navigating as the author is kind of telling you this story, which I think is really incredible. And I wanted to ask, have you read the poem that this comes from?
Yes. Do you want me to read it to you?
I do, because I've never read it. I wanted to save it.
So it's a Paul Eluard poem from 1932, and you know, he was, and what's really funny is the title is French, and it means, I was talking to a friend this morning trying to be sure that that we had the right translation. It means slightly disfigured, which is also quite funny since the book is a lot about youth and beauty.
Yeah.
But I'll read you the poem, and I can read you the translation if you want.
Yes, absolutely.
Or just the translation.
And wait, but did you read this book originally in French?
I did. You know what? I read it in French also this past time because I couldn't order. I don't have it with me, and I couldn't order. It's not available electronically. It wouldn't have arrived in time, and it's not available electronically in English on like download version. So I just got the French.
Do you find a big difference in reading it in the original versus the translation?
Not. I mean, I don't remember exactly, but I did find it. The thing I did find fascinating was that it wasn't readily available in translation. I was like, how is this possible? You know, it's always fascinating that like, you know, a book that's so, you know, well, you know, loved or somehow hasn't been, I mean, I think that's why reading works in translation is super important, because it's like getting, you know, these stories from other places. And then when you find out I think there's a statistic, I have to check this, but that the United States publishing marketplace has like the smallest amount of works in translation.
Which is so sad because almost all of my favorite books have been translations that I've read. Like The
Bad Girl. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and it's also like you're getting, you know, and that's the way you're able to get other perspectives.
Yeah. And like that cultural difference is some of the most intriguing writing you can ever read, because, you know, you can relate, but you also see this very big cultural difference. And that's why I think it's like so important. And I know Bookmark is going to carry this, so I'm very excited about
it. And so, okay, so this poem. So it starts, Adieu tristesse, bonjour tristesse. Tu es inscrit dans la ligne du plafond. Tu es inscrit dans le lieu que j'aime. Tu n'es pas tout à fait la misère, car le lèvre le plus pauvre te dénonce par un sourire. And I'll only read you that first, because I get nervous now when I speak French. It's like,
which, by the way, I took French for 3.5 years, and I still get so nervous to like speak it or listen or do anything with French. So
I'm always like, oh my god, my accent, like I get like clam up. But basically it means farewell sadness, hello sadness. You are inscribed in the lines on the ceiling. You are inscribed in the eyes that I love. You are not poverty, since the poorest of lips denounce you. Ah, with a smile. I mean, it's a poem, so I probably could have read that a bit. I could have done a better job reading that.
No, but that's such a beautiful poem.
And it's really interesting, though, the disfigure, this kind of idea. And in the last stanza, I'll read you in English just because it's kind of relevant. It says, love of kind bodies, power of love, from which kindness rises, like a bodiless monster, unattached head, sadness, beautiful face. And so she's clearly at war, too, with what she looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And with this idea that, like, she's seeing her father also be led by, you know, again, why he's seduced by Elsa again. And she, like, doesn't really... She's like, there's something very powerful, but also very scary.
Yeah, like she's...
in that ability as a woman.
She has the ability to recognize, you know, Anne's appeal being intelligent. She knows that, you know, she can recognize the difference between someone like Elsa and Anne, but she also sees her father's weakness. And I think recognizing that at such a young age and kind of being able to be like, well, yeah, Anne is intelligent and smart, but here's young Elsa, and I know my father, and which is a sad thing, you know, to like, I think recognize her father's weakness in that way. But it is also a very powerful thing for her to be able to do at such a young age.
And it's almost like she's saying, am I going to be an Elsa or am I going to be an Anne?
Yeah. And being an Anne, I think, really scares her.
Totally.
And that's probably where she gets her sort of agenda to kind of kick Anne out.
And in a way,
like, or sort of self-reflect.
It's like she's killing off the Anne because she doesn't want that part of herself.
Yeah, because it's scary. It's the harder route to take, but I think that's also what she realizes at the end is the lessons that Anne kind of taught her.
And that she does have to sit with herself, which is kind of, again, full circle.
I know, full circle, which we are all doing currently, is sitting with ourselves. But seriously, thank you so much for coming on and talking about this.
Thank you.
Awesome.
No,
I'm very excited. When your novel comes out, I really want to read it, so please.
I'm so excited for you to read it. I would love to talk again. Thank you
for
having me.
Have you been working on it for a long time?
Yeah, it's been like 7 years actually, and it's a really short book. I mean,
so
no, it's not
the 7 weeks that.
It's not 7 weeks. It's 7 years, and it's the same amount of pages. So this tells you a lot about.
Kind of gives you a false idea of the writing process when you hear she did this in 7 weeks. But well, 7 years. I'm very excited to read it now.
I'm excited for you to read it. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye. All right, that was so awesome. She's so smart. I'm so happy to talk to another woman writer. I think, like, what a better time to do this when we're talking about Françoise. I hope you guys got to read it, and also if you haven't already, I highly recommend the movie. It's super, super beautifully done, and Françoise oversaw the whole thing, so it's very much true to her vision for the characters, and I think that's really important when you're adapting something like this book that was so beloved by so many. All right, well, this book will be available at Bookmark, which, again, I'll say it again, it's one of my favorite bookstores in New York when this is all cleared up and we're going outside again. I definitely think you guys should pick it up. It's a book that I try to read, you know, twice a year. Just, it's like very much brings me back to that time and my current time. And, you know, I even think like when I'm a mom, I want to read it and to feel like a 17-year-old again. It's really captures the essence of youth really well. And also I really want to thank Marc Jacobs for donating masks. That means the world to me. You know, you can feel helpless when you can't actually get out there and do things, which I think we're all kind of experiencing right now. But there are absolutely still ways to help, and I've been doing my research trying to find the best ways to help. I'm so beyond grateful to Mark and his whole team for making this happen, and you guys for making this happen. You know, if you guys weren't so active and incredible throughout this whole thing, we wouldn't have been able to do it. So thank you so much. I will announce the book later today for next week. I hope you guys read it. Hope we get to talk about it. And yeah, if you guys have any suggestions of like more things you want done on this live, please let me know. I'm super open to everything. And have a wonderful rest of your day. Please stay busy, read a book if you want to. I will be reading.